Now, Sufism was created as a reaction to Maulviism. So it is strange that one name of Sufism is called Maulvi. You call it Malavi, we call it Maulvi. One and the same thing. So Maulviism is a trend found in every religion after the demise of the founder of religions, all founders of religion. There is a universal trend that after a while the Maulvis gain the upper hand. They stress formalities overmuch, and they believe that the outer form of religion is all that religion is. So in that process they gradually forget about the spiritualism, which in fact is the essence of religion. If religion is empty of spiritualism, there is no meaning of saying Allahu Akbar and Subhanallah and this and that, because such people who do not really delve deeper into the attributes of Allah and understand what they are talking about, so their hearts and souls are moved and stirred to, spiritual ecstasy. If that does not happen, the prayers remain empty, just utensils without any food in them. So that is what always happens to every religion, unfortunately, because religion always comes with a form, with an exercise sort of thing, which you find in regiments. When in the military regiments, they teach you how to do drill and exercise. So the purpose of the drill is to defend yourself and the country from the enemy. And if you do not remain oriented towards that purpose and remain confined only to the drill part, then that drill would be meaningless. So every religion has a drill and a purpose. The drill is to perform ablution the way the religions teach, to clean yourself physically, and later on start remembering Allah with some forms which are prescribed differently by different religions. That is the form, that is the drill. And the purpose is that you should fill your heart with the memory of God and you get closer to Him. And a new person is born from within you who is far more God-fearing as he goes on worshipping Him. And he does not only love God but also loves His servants, the humanity at large, the suffering humanity and the people. So this is the sum total of religion which we witness at the time of the founding of every religion. The quality may be different, but the basics remain the same. Every prophet brings this with him. You remember God, but not just sitting idly and remembering Him. Do it with a purpose, with a form, so that the memory is retained and it's not wasted. So the form is highly essential too, but only for the purpose of protecting the spirit of religion. Like if you fill your hands with milk like this, you'll either drink it or it will leak out and be finished. You have to have some bottle, some container in which milk can be put and preserved. So this is the relationship between the form of religions and the spirit of religions. At the time of the prophets, as I mentioned, there is no bifurcation whatsoever between form and spirit. No prophet divided it into two parts. He worshipped in form and worshipped in spirit. So the best illustration is that of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He remembered God, I think, millions of times more intensely than the so-called Sufis do. But he didn't abandon prayer, the form. He said prayers 5 times a day, plus nawafil, the optional prayers. Plus he got up at night, and sometimes more than half a night he was engaged in prayer, until God told him to reduce this load. It's too much. So form continued, and each prayer which he performed was filled with the love of God like I can't describe. And the more he closed upon God, more he leaned upon his people. He did not cut himself off from the daily life. He did not cut himself off from the servants of God. The more he loved God, the more he loved his creatures. So this is religion. But unfortunately, when the mullahs or the Maulavis begin to overemphasize the form, and their hearts and spirits and character and morals do not change in accordance with the spirit of religion, then they begin to acquire a personality which is not loving or attractive. They become hateful. People loathe them. And yet they have to follow them because they are the only people who can lead them. When this happens, then other catastrophe is witnessed at such times, that masses generally move away from religion. Because the example of these people is not very attractive. So they think as long as they lead the prayer and we do and perform it and come back, that's all we have to do. Then we must return to the world which we desire, the world which we truly, genuinely pursue. So religion is split in another direction, in another plane. The followers of such mullahs remain no longer interested in the spirit of religion because their leaders are not interested. They only dictate things with the threat of punishment. No, this does not soften the hearts. All right, say the prayer or go to hell, do this or go to the hell, or you will be lashed so many times. And this rigid attitude takes the love of religion out of the heart of people, so they follow them out of threat or mere formality. When this happens, then nobody can guard the values of morality. It is the time in fact, the bell begins to toll for their spiritual death from that moment. They go on receding into a life of duality, of hypocrisy. They believe in something else and act in a completely different way, contrary way to what they believe in. Now this as a whole creates a very strong reaction in the hearts of those people who know it is all a fraud. The whole people are living a lie in the name of God. And these mullahs are empty and meaningless. Only they're interested in their own earning, what they earn out of religion. So this reaction throws them to the other side of the pendulum, So the pendulum begins to swing. On one side, instead of remaining in the middle, you move it to one direction, it touches the other extreme, and then as a natural reaction, it starts swinging back, but does not stop at the middle, goes across to the other height, to the other extreme. And it is there that Sufism is born. You say, what do they mean by form? We are fed up, we are tired of form. To hell with form. What is important is the memory of Allah. love of mankind, spiritual excitement or spiritual pleasure. So if we can achieve spiritual pleasure without 5 times daily prayers, if we can recede into our own selves and remember God in a romantic way, and do not have to get up 5 times for ablution things and this and that, just get lost in the memories, sweet memories of God. That should be sufficient. And then they begin to become sort of idolaters, because they expect too much from their Sufi peers or murshids. The commoner, I was talking of leaders. Like before, I talked of the Maulvi as leader. Then I turned to the common people. Sufis also have common following behind them. So these common people who are inclined towards Sufism, they think that our Sufi lives with God somewhere, is very close to him. And as such, you remember Sufi instead of God, and try to imprint the personality of the Sufi on your heart, your mind, your whole the whole of your character. And then you will gain nearest to God. So the Naqshbandis appear. This exactly is the message. You think of your peer, your great spiritual leader, and try to imprint his Naqsh on your heart. But it started, in fact, with a different stress, not this of the Sheikh. It started with the stress that you visualize God in certain attributes. Say, Huwa al-Haq, and then repeat it. Haq, 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 Haq. Do it continuously until you hear like a scream, Haq, 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 Haq. That's right. And that stroke, every stroke, will imprint the quality of al-Haq on your heart and your mind and your body. So this is how the concept of Naqshbandi began, but it deviated into the form of the Tasawwur-e-Shaykh, they call it. Thinking of the Shaykh, your spiritual leader. So instead of thinking of God, they start thinking of the Shaykh. And this sort of Sufism has also penetrated Ismaili sect. And they went so far away, the other Sufis do not, they remain somewhat halfway between. But they went so far away that all their prayer is just praying to their spiritual leader, whoever it is. And whatever his conduct, even if he drinks, he commits other things, it does not make the slightest difference to the followers of Agha Khans. Because they say, we think of Agha Khan and we will be redeemed from everything. All our sins will be forgiven. So a sort of cross between Christianity and some other cults comes to be created. And then you see the sect of Agha Khan being born. So this Sufism, as I told you, started with good intentions. They are put onto this journey initially by the mullahs and their stupid behavior or emptiness. It was the emptiness of their hearts which created this reaction among some spiritual thinking people. But once they began these movements, they were inherited by people who again took their words as form. So another tragedy began, form of Sufism. So they ran away from form and ran into the lap of form. So every Sufi firqa or sect has its own form now. You do it like this, standing, sitting, or dancing. You do it with music. And then the spiritual message will sink into your heart. So these are signs of decadence. They are signs, all signs of, ultimately they are signs of darkness. You move away from the time of a prophet and you begin to sink into gradual degradation, decadence, and the pit of darkness. But in the darkness they have their own small lights, lamps carry lamps and dance around them. This is Sufism at last. Please.
See, incidentally I mentioned Ismaili sect and said that whatever their head may do, they are not concerned, they don't bother about this. I came to learn why from a report printed here in some British media. I don't remember whether it was Times or some other newspaper, which had published an interview with the late Prince Karim. Isn't he late Prince Karim? Yes. Which was he was interviewed by some very well-known press representative. I don't know which paper did he represent, but he was a very well-known journalist who took the interview. And I believe he was not telling lies when he said this. He inquired from Prince Karim while he was drinking whiskey during the interview, that am I wrong to understand that drinking is strongly prohibited in Islam? It's forbidden. But what do I see? Why are you drinking? You are the head of a very important sect and you drink. So he writes that before answering me, he took a sip of whiskey and said, "You are mistaken. We, the Agha Khans, when we drink, the wine does not pass our throat, but it becomes water." So why to spend on water so much? You can get free water from the tap, or you can pay a few cents for a bottle of pure water. Why to spend so much on whiskey when ultimately it has to turn into water? So this is, the extent to which people lose this common sense. Because when they start believing blindly in doctrines, this is what comes of them. They know it and they do not care. So this is the degenerative process. And also in the Sufis, particularly in Turkey, sometimes they dance themselves to a state of unconsciousness. And they call it spiritual ecstasy. They turn their head round and round and round and round until they feel so giddy that they lose their consciousness. And people say, "Wah, wah, wah, subhanallah, Allahu Akbar." This man is reached God now. Both these cases are very confusing for ordinary people. How can we say they are wrong and we are right? The best unfaltering test is to apply these things to the personality of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Could any sane man with an iota of common sense in him visualize Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam doing this? It will be an insult, a grave insult to his personality dishonor. Can anybody visualize any prophet of God drinking wine and saying that it turns into water as it passes through my throat? There has to be some very special gadget, implanted in the throat by God. It passes through that gadget and turns into water. So this is
the sad story of the decline of Islam, which takes different forms of decline. Another very important thing which should be specially marked is the difference of attitude of those people who went to Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and those who goes to such Sufis. Those who go to such Sufis. They go to the Sufis not for, most often, not for a personal transformation at all, with some needs, with empty hands. Give us a son, give us a girl, give us this, give us a job, give us some honorable status in life, give us something of this and that. And they believe that these people have the power to grant us these things. And when they return home, there is not an iota of change in their life. They're as immoral as they used to be. Even they are encouraged to become more immoral, because they believe when such a great Sufi is at our back, standing at our back, supporting us, why should we bother about a few trivial sins of committing a murder or two, or a small thing of depriving anybody else of his property and running away with it? They're just incidental gains. And the real thing is Sudu Sufi. As long as we remain on the right side of the Sufi, it's quite sufficient. So the gifts they carry to the court of the Sufis or the Peers, they are the gifts which they think will win the favor of that Sufi and win the favor of God along with it. Whatever crimes do we commit, it doesn't make any difference. While the Sufis themselves seldom realize that the gifts which were presented to them was a result of haram money, forbidden money, and unlawful money which they had gained. There are in cases reported where in the olden times the Sufi type people were really good, pious people, and God protected them from eating such things. Once a Sufi, real great Sufi, God-fearing person, he was invited to the royal feast somewhere. He began to eat and drew his hand away, saying something to the effect that this is the blood of the usurped money, blood of the people, hungry poor people, which you are eating. I am not going to eat that. Or if it was not something which happened at a court, it happened somewhere, but the essence of this story is that sometimes Allah saves His pious people from eating wrong food because they willfully avoid such food with all their effort. So God protects them to the degree that even by mistake they do not do it. But the Peers and Faqirs we know, the Sufis, etc., they never even remotely think of such possibilities. Whatever comes their way, it's fine, it's okay by them. Again, these people, even if they die, they remain the object of their love. So the love stops short at the Sufi or the head of a particular sect and doesn't go across to God. While in case of Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he is told he is informed to us by God and repeatedly in the Quran that to follow him is to follow God. To love him is to love God. And the love does reach God because you get your response from God, not from him. So when you receive your response of love from God, how can you doubt that your love was carried and delivered to God? Not personally, consciously by the Prophet, but the way he teaches you to follow him, in each step you take behind him, you gain nearness of God. This is the meaning of that love. And you know it. You're getting closer. So all that you gain is God, not just the worldly material things. Of course, people used to beg Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to pray for them for small things of this and that, but their nearness to him was not for that purpose. It was merely out of love for God that they loved Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But the crowd that these people attract, they attract a materialistic crowd. They have no fine sense of values. They're just extremely egoistic, and they love their own self and require their own desires to be fulfilled, and that is all that there is to life for them. So the difference between the rightness of a sect or a view can easily be judged. There is no difficulty whatsoever if you put it to the right touchstone. And the touchstone must always be Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Because the Holy Quran says God has created him as uswa for you. Uswa means the touchstone. So why do the people today do not go to the uswa of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? Again, for the same reason, because it's not goodness they love. It's not God they love. They love their own ulterior motives and material gains, so they get it, they think they get it from the Sufis, and that's quite sufficient for them.